Can't the Culture Warriors just for one day just shut up? It's a game about a fun little cat. What's up, buddy? How you been? You like my new hat? When I bought it, I didn't realize how stupid it would look. It is I look very stupid in this hat. Regardless, we're not here to talk about my hat. We're here to talk about game journalism, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Now, I've mentioned this before. I used to be a game journalist. That was actually my dream as a kid, is that was what I wanted to grow up to do. I wanted to cover video games, write articles, make videos, and I did it for a little bit of time. I worked for a couple small outlets, Destructoid, whatever else, but I realized let's just say that space was taken over by psychopaths and weirdos. And those psychopaths and weirdos are the guys we're going to talk about here today. Real quick, before we get into it, hit subscribe. Like I said, I was kicked. I couldn't exist in the mainstream. Okay, the mainstream media, these game outlets. I had to leave. I had to do it independently, and that's what I'm doing now. And thank you to everyone who supports me. I want to talk about this game, Stray, as you can see on my screen. Now, Stray is a game where you're a stray cat exploring an urban kind of cyberpunk environment. I gotta actually play this game. I haven't made time for it, but it looks fantastic. And it's just a fun little game. You're a cat running around. You know I love cats. So I'm very excited about this game. And then always, why? Why do they do this? The game journalists have to ruin the fun cat game for all of us by telling us that this cat game where a cat goes and meets robots and explores a city is actually racist. I'm so exhausted. I'm so tired. Why? Can't we just have like this one little thing? Can't the Culture Warriors just for one day just shut up? It's a game about a fun little cat. Why? Well, here's Kotaku. I don't know how Kotaku... Who reads this website? I don't even think their own readers like them. And maybe we'll take a look at the comments, because even the Kotaku commentators are like, what is this? Stray falls into the usual Orientalism pitfalls of the cyberpunk genre. The cat simulation game appropriates Asian aesthetics. Appropriates. Cultural appropriation. Shut it down. I need a cultural appropriation button. I'm going to set up, I have one of those Steam Decks where you can set up buttons that have little noise, like sound effects. I'm going to set up one that just pops up cultural appropriation, but does not grapple with the walled city's historical legacy. Now, this is the stupidest thing in the world. We're going to read this whole thing. It's kind of long. I'll try to skip around through it. Okay. If you felt uncomfortable about the rice patty hats in Stray, you aren't the only one. Stray lifts Asian aesthetics to evoke exoticism and danger, but doesn't engage with the history of the city it appropriates. This is especially problematic, I need a button for that one too, because its real-world setting carries painful historical baggage that can't be reduced to neon signs and cramped apartments. Okay, so, you know what? I can't read this whole thing. It's nonsense. Basically, and I believe there was a picture at one point. I could be crazy, or at least it's not loading right now, but the setting of Stray was based on Kowloon Walled City. Now, this is a common thing, that there was this city in Hong Kong that was so densely populated that it has inspired, artists and creators and filmmakers. I don't know why it's not loading the image here. Let me see if this one works. Yeah, it was just like cramped, just stacked buildings on top of buildings, and it was not, there was no safety codes. There was exposed wiring everywhere, exposed plumbing. You can see it was the ultimate definition of urban sprawl and decay. And that has served, this was a shot from the outside. They actually demolished this. You cannot visit this anymore because it was so unsafe. But this has helped define the cyberpunk aesthetic. Okay, when you play cyberpunk games or watch the movies, it has this kind of urban sprawl, and a lot of, again, the designers take inspiration from what was this crazy neon-lit wonderland, dystopian wonderland, I'll get into some of that, but basically he's saying, well, here's the thing. Because, yeah, again, the game Stray looks kind of like this. And actually, what's interesting, this is not a picture of Kowloon Walled City, so I'll save this image, but this is kind of the aesthetic that it looked like. But he's saying this was such a horrible place to live, and people lived in poverty. How can you make it a fun world for this cat to explore? That's racist. It's racist because you're not grappling with the real-world ramifications of the place that this was inspired by. It's like, bro, it's a game about a cat running around and jumping. He's not going to address the poverty of 1970s Hong Kong. It's not about 1970s Hong Kong. It's a futuristic landscape that was somewhat inspired by Kowloon Walled City, but it's not going to start getting into, like, I don't know, racism, poverty, what do you want it to address? I'm gonna see if he mentions the history of the walled city is inexplicably tied to colonial rivalries, but none of it is represented in Stray. Well, yeah, because the game's not about Kowloon Walled City. It's about this is a completely different town that, yes, was inspired by how it looked. Now he's also upset that some of the robots are wearing what you call a rice paddy hat. Let me see if I can zoom in. You know, those classic that they would wear in the fields while picking rice. And I don't know exactly why, if it protected them. I think obviously to protect them from the sun as they were out picking rice in the rice fields. And he goes, well, why would a robot wear that? It's just because this game wants to steal and appropriate Asian culture. And it's like, well, clearly these robots have, evolved to take on aspects of human culture, and it's very possible that the robots, I think, just took from all cultures that they saw. Okay, they're like an amalgamation of whatever was left of humanity, and they're like, well, humans used to wear these hats sometimes, so I guess maybe we should. I don't know. We're confused robots living in a dystopian society. As he says, these rice hats have a troubled history within the Asian diaspora community. I never know what this word means. They're used as a racial shorthand to indicate Asian origins, regardless of the actual context. I mean, yeah, it's a hat from Asia, so if I see a guy wearing one, I assume that he's Asian. It is a visual shorthand. Is that wrong? If I put a guy in, dress that is, if I put someone in a burqa, is that offensive because I'm indicating that they're Muslim using their traditional garb or stuff that they would be wearing? How is that why is that a problem? Thankfully, Stray meets the bare minimum of not racist language to describe the robots, but the game's rampant appropriation of Asian history and culture needs to be supported by care in design and implementation. So, what do you want? There was a great comment here. And the comment, I'm going to try and find it real quick. Again, he talks about this idea of techno-orientalism, where a lot of these futuristic shows will use Asian-inspired stuff. A lot of that comes from the 80s, when we thought, Japan was going to take over the world. They were becoming one of the rising economies. So when we envisioned the future with, like, cyberpunk and stuff, with movies like Blade Runner, there was a lot of Asian influence because it did look like the future was going to be Asian, Chinese, Japanese, whatever it was. Though it looked like they might become the dominant superpower. It still looks like China might become the dominant superpower. So it's not racist to depict the future as Asian. It's just a prediction. It's a prediction of, well, Asia's doing pretty good. There's a lot of those guys. If anyone's going to keep growing and taking over the globe, it very possibly could be Asian culture that we see in the future. That's not techno-orientalism. That's just a prediction of what's going on. Now, again, the commenters have thankfully fought back. Again, this guy says, I'm a Japanese descendant, and he says, these hats are a common trope in the cyberpunk genre, but it's not to punch down on Eastern culture. He agrees with me. Again, it's a way to denote Eastern culture seeping into Western societies. It's the idea that the future is going to have a very real Asian component just based on the growth rates and the technology and what's happening so far. Now, here was the thread that I found very poignant, and it's a very good point. War Greymon said, what is your point? Do you think other settings don't have baggage? If this game was set in the US, for instance, Would the game need to educate us on Native American genocide and slavery? If the movie is set in Germany, does the story have to be about a certain horrible thing that happened to a certain group of people that I can't say without getting demonetized? Why do people pretend that the US and Europe are the only places without baggage? That's a very good point. It's always when we visit a foreign setting that these people come out of the woodwork who goes, well, you can't set a game in India without addressing, the partition. You can't set a game in Japan without talking about, the nuclear war, the nukes we launched at them. You can't have a game set, they want to force in these historical events, and they think that it's somehow wrong to depict these regions without talking about it. Well, I hate to tell you, Japanese people are not all defined by Hiroshima. German people are not all defined by World War II. These countries have long legacies and histories that you can go and you can make something about Germany without having to touch on that. That's not the only identity of Germany. This is not the only identity of Hong Kong, Kowloon, Walled City. And as Dumb Beetle responds, and I think really kind of brings some perspective to it, Kotaku always brings a US-centric view to this stuff that reeks of navel-gazing. When a French studio sets their game in the US, there's no eyebrow-raising or grappling with anything because America is the default location with default humans. And that's kind of the point. Kotaku is kind of racist in the way that if a game is set in America, they go, well, that's just the default. That's fine. There's nothing attached there. You don't have to do anything with history or culture. But suddenly, if there's an Asian setting, it's exotic, it's foreign, and now you have an obligation with cultural appropriation and making sure that you cover all the historical aspects of it. If you think, what do you call it? Somehow, if French people choose an Asian setting, because I believe the developers of this cat game are French, they're appropriating this Asian culture. I don't think American progressives realize how bizarre this concept is from a non-American perspective. The rest of the world is laughing at it, so let's be clear. American progressives also not seem to acknowledge the absolutely shocking implication in 2022 of increased Asian socio-political weight that Anglo-Saxon settings are neutral and privileged, while settings outside of the US and Europe do not have this kind of colonial baggage. So it's a way of saying that you really don't examine your own culture and your own country, that you go, oh, there's so much baggage attached to all these foreign places, and you go, well, what about this game set in America? And it's like, yeah, that's fine. That's the default. That's normal. And they don't think about any of these socio-political conflicts or whatever the hell they're talking about. I know this is getting very complicated. One thing, I did want to bring up that image, because we're talking about appropriating Kowloon Walled City. This was actually an arcade, a famous arcade in Japan, which has unfortunately closed, which modeled their entire aesthetic after Kowloon Walled City. As you can see off to the corner, you're going to see that Street Fighter machine. And again, this is an Asian group this is in Japan, so these are Asian businessmen who, appropriated this Hong Kong thing. I've never heard anyone say, well, that's racist towards other Asians or what. No, everyone uses this setting, this dystopian, rundown setting for a variety of projects. And it's not do you want to go into this arcade and have them give you a lecture about how awful Kowloon Walled City was and all the appropriation whatever. This is nonsense. Guys, the point is there's a cat game. That's it. Why do we have to talk about any of this? Kotaku, why are you driving me nuts? This is a game about a cat who meets robot people and goes on an adventure. Can we just have that? Can we just have fun? Can you shut up for 2 seconds and let us have fun? Why do you do this? You're all driving me insane. Guys, let me know in the comments. Are you losing your mind the way I'm losing my mind? I'm losing my mind. These people are driving me up a wall. I just want to play a fun cat game. I don't want to be told, well, the setting is inspired by colonial Hong Kong. If you don't grapple with the socio-political racial tensions, no. It's a game about a cat. It's a game for having fun. All these journalists, frankly, I want them gone. I want them to all be fired. I want them to have no job. They're actively making the world a worse place. And I believe some journalists are good. I want to clarify. But these guys who focus on this endless wokeism, progressive, problematic war are driving me crazy. Let me know if you agree in the comments. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel. And please sign up for the mailing list for my comic book super killer. We are almost at 1,000 signups on the mailing list. Could you be number 1,000? The only way to find out is to check out the mailing list. Please help me out. I really appreciate it. Have fun, guys. Take care of yourself. Go play the cat game. It's not racist. I promise. I promise. It's just a cat. It's not racist.